Hi everyone, so this is my thought process when I was creating this ant diagram on how I learn with Moodle. There are 4 immutable objects: the teacher, internet, student, and Moodle, because you need all of these objects in order to actually have Moodle work. So the teacher basically is defined by like the empathy level, teaching ability, knowledge of subject. Those are the properties. The students, it depends on the interest and knowledge of the subject. The student and teacher need access to both the internet and also access to Moodle, and the internet needs to give access to Moodle as well. The student and teacher both need to have a login in order to access Moodle, and the student needs to interact with Moodle in order to get access to information on the course. The teacher's job is to post and change the layout of basically how Moodle is presented. So info on, basically you would get different elements in Moodle that the teacher would adjust accordingly. Info on future assignments, resources, grade, and assignments. And also the teacher would assess these assignments and get a grade out of it. And it's kind of like the same thing with the student. They need to get access to all of this via Moodle. I wanted to add the fire object motivation. Motivation is there as a fire object because it's not necessarily needed in order to actually do well in the course or just, do the course in general. But there's 2 different ideas or properties behind motivation: intrinsic and extrinsic. Basically, internal motivation and external motivation. For instance, external motivation would come from feedback, which I'll get into in a minute. And intrinsic is basically, it comes from internal, and that would be based on the student's interest and knowledge of subjects. And the relationship is that self-determination. So if you have more interest in the subject, you might have more motivation to do well, and that will indeed cause you to end up doing better in your grade because you're doing more and understanding more. And that's why the motivation and grade have a performance connected to it, because it will up your performance most likely. And I also put revisit, Moodle, and motivation, because if you're motivated, you're going to want to revisit Moodle more often, or at least that's with me, and be able to understand and get access to all this information multiple times. So I wanted to move on to the teacher. So the teacher, I connected it to empathy and understanding, which is beneficial for interpersonal skills. That's kind of like the connection, because if you have more empathy and understanding, you'll be able to understand the students and others more effectively. For feedback, I have the relationship with stimulation student growth. And why I have that there is because if the teacher is motivated motivated as in like has empathy and understanding, they want to stimulate student growth by giving feedback and giving that time. And I have that connected to motivation, and why I have like arrows pointing back and forth is because feedback makes you more motivated because it's external, and then motivation to get the feedback and actually read it is coming from the student. So that's why there's an arrow back and forth. Then there's going to be answer questions, building student confidence. So why I put this here is because for a teacher, they want to build student confidence, especially if they're an empathetic and understanding teacher. They will understand that you need to actually teach and be able to help the students. Basically, the more questions you answer, the more you'll build the students' confidence in that they understand the material. Basically, answer questions, ask questions, and the critical thinking skills. So I'm going to go a little backwards. So I'm going to go back to motivation. And I'm putting motivation and connecting it to ask questions, because if you're motivated, that means you're going to basically use critical thinking skills more often. That's a relationship with the 2. And that means you're going to question more often, because you might end up not understanding a few things and actually wanting to learn more. The arrows, there are 2 sets of arrows, is because you're asking more questions, you're more motivated to learn more. So it's kind of like a back and forth. The same thing with ask questions and answer questions. It's helpful for the learning process. So the student wants to ask questions and answer, and those answers to those questions will be helpful for learning. So that's why they're connected, and also why they have arrows connected back and forth to them. So this is the overall idea behind it, and I just want to say that why empathy and understanding and feedback, answer questions, ask questions, motivation, all of these are fire objects because they're not necessarily needed, but they are beneficial to the student to learn. For me personally, what I learned from thinking about the diagram, I end up realizing how important feedback is, and that external motivation really helps me motivate me, because I really look at the feedback, I like to revisit, and I'm realizing how self-determination is so important to give me that motivation. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a great day.